And it is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with Heather Lofthouse and yours truly, Robert Reich. Heather, another big week. What are we going to talk about?
We are going to talk about Zelensky's visit to the office and Trump to the Oval Office and Trump and Vance berating him, the Musk Trump slash and burn that continues, the GOP budget chaos, and then how about some seeds of hope?
Oh, I
Just a
want
few.
seeds of hope.
Just a
Please,
few.
let's come to seeds
You
of hope.
start there?
Heather, how are you? I haven't seen you in a week. Are you doing okay?
I know. Well, we've seen each other, but we haven't coffeed in a week, right? I'm
Yeah.
okay. I mean, are you? It's not great. Do you really want to know? I mean, it's not great. But
It's not
having
great. Yeah.
you to meet, even though I know it's a podcast and lots of people are listening, but I still, the idea of meeting you, Robert Reich, for coffee, it makes me happier. How are
Well,
you?
good. The feeling is mutual. But I'll tell you, we don't want to wallow in our own kind of sense of how difficult this is, this period, and we'll come back to it. But I really, I don't. I mean, I've been around for 78 years. I remember politics from when I was 4 years old. I met Vice President Henry Wallace, former
Oh,
Vice
that's
President Henry
right.
Wallace.
You sat in his lap, didn't you?
Yes, but so that's maybe 74 years of sentient political discussion or politics. I don't remember anything close to what we're going through right now,
Not in
and
America.
I never expected. I never
I
expected
know.
it.
I know.
Anyway, yes, Trump and Vance berated Zelensky in the Oval Office.
Wow. Wow.
Say thank you.
I said it a lot of times to American people.
Accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I understand, sir.
I think it's
I
very
understand.
important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the
I'm
cards.
thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
tell you
You're
again,
running
I
low
know.
on soldiers.
Don't-
Listen,
don't please,
you're running
Mr.
low on
President.
soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And then
President.
then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I wanted this. Look. If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you'd take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're
I
saying
said-
you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't
doesn't
with
matter
me.
for you what-
That
what
wasn't
this
with me.
means. It
That was
wasn't
with
with you.
a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person.
This
That
is
was
your,
with,
this
that was
is
with
your
Obama.
president. It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
I mean, watching the clips of it was sickening.
It is sickening because Zelensky, remember, this is for more than 3 years, he has led the resistance to Putin's aggression. I mean, Zelensky is probably one of the bravest, most really tenacious leaders we have seen. His ability to keep his people together, to keep their spirits up, to actually negotiate with Europe, with the United States, in terms of what he needed to maintain this, to lose huge numbers of Ukrainians in the process. And to maintain his dignity and aplomb is extraordinary. And what does he do? What happens? He comes to the Oval Office and Trump yells at him and Vance yells at him. I've never seen anything as inappropriate, as demeaning, as I'm struggling for words here, as I often do when I try to describe what happens with Trump. But this really did take the cake.
Well, so why does Trump set this up in front of the cameras, 2 against 1? And it was, like you said, it was humiliating. I mean, he did this on purpose. So what is his goal?
Well, it's a very clear goal. He wants to settle this war on Putin's terms. He is on Putin's side, but the American people are not quite happy with that. They don't want to see Putin victorious. They don't want to see the United States join Putin so explicitly. And so Trump feels like he's got to take down Zelensky. He's got to humiliate him. He's got to make Zelensky, he's called Zelensky a dictator. He has said with absolute, I mean, it's an absolute lie, obviously, that Zelensky and Ukraine started this war. I mean, he's doing everything he can to basically in the public's eye. And Trump is always thinking about the American public and what the American public is seeing on television. This is staged very carefully, and he knew, and Vance knew in advance what they were going to do. And the purpose, again, is to make Zelensky less of a hero figure for the American people, so that when Putin wins the territory that he's going to win, the terms that he's going to win, when Trump allows Putin to basically declare victory, there's not much of a blowback.
And also, it's sound bites of lies, right? So he's saying, I'm not on Putin's side. I'm on the United States side. I'm on the world side. And so it's these sound bites of lies that he also can't wait to get out there on the internet, onto people's phones. But Zelensky was so calm. I mean, Vance and Trump were elevated. And Zelensky, I don't know how he did it. I mean, not an easy
No, I mean, it's
situation.
an impossible position for him to be in. And it'll be interesting. I mean, a lot of the headlines, newspaper headlines, talked about a shouting match in the Oval Office. Well, I didn't hear Zelensky shout. Zelensky was very moderate. The shouting was all from Trump and from Vance. And what an inappropriate place. I mean, you have a foreign leader who is a heroic figure as your guest in the White House. Our guest. He's not just Trump's guest. The White House is the people's house, Heather. I want to just emphasize and remind everybody that when a foreign president comes to our people's house, our White House, he should be honored. That's an opportunity for us to show our respect. And we did through Trump just exactly the opposite.
And Vance, and there was more of Vance than we've seen in a while, which was interesting. And he said exactly the opposite, right? You're being disrespectful.
I hope there is really blowback against Trump for how he treated Zelensky. And remember, Zelensky we know the Trump-Zelensky relationship because in the Trump's first term, Trump really tried to get Zelensky to dig up dirt on Joe Biden, on Hunter Biden, in anticipation of the 2020 election. And
he held him hostage. I mean, he said,
hostage.
You get no money unless you deliver for me.
Yeah.
Talk about diplomacy. Well, so we have this visit. I mean, it's just the round the clock having to watch what's happening in D.C. So this is after Elon Musk attends a cabinet meeting and dominates it, standing up, didn't have a seat at the table, didn't have a name card, but dominated. You've been in the cabinet. I mean, this is unbelievable, right?
Yeah, this is not a cabinet meeting. A cabinet meeting, if it's a working meeting, is you don't have the press there, for one thing, and everybody is quite, you try to be as candid as possible because you are working together. You're working for a president, but no, this was a show and tell. This was Donald Trump's opportunity to put on another show before the press, and showing that the cabinet really, despite words to the contrary, despite reporting to the contrary, the cabinet is 100% in favor of what Musk is doing. This is, Musk probably wanted this. Trump probably conceded, yes, we will do this. And the cabinet were just stooges. They were just props.
That's it. And Musk was able to say, we've made a few mistakes. I mean, this is inevitable. Big deal. And so I think it was kind of a CYA as well. right?
Yes, and it comes at a particularly awkward point for Musk because Doge, his so-called Department of Government Efficiency, is making mistake after mistake after mistake, and the press is picking up many of those mistakes, even though a lot of what Doge does is in complete secret, but there are enough, we're beginning to get enough reports from enough people inside certainly inside departments and inside agencies that are telling the reporters actually what an absolute fiasco this is.
Right. I have to say, this is so overwhelming and so depressing to be living right now, March 1st, 2025, but it's helpful sitting with you and having you break it down and thinking about what's really happening. I mean, I do think that there's value. I was telling my kid this. We have to learn from all that's going on. And so I just want to say that as we go through, and I have more on my list for you, that I'm grateful that we're talking about it.
Well, there is a big, I mean, the danger here, talking about it just between you and me and also everybody who's watching, is that we get pulled down by the reality. It's so dark and it's so, despairing in many ways. And that's why I'm very eager to get Heather to the portion of our little discussion that you said is going to be green shoots, positive news. But you're right. We have to go through what is actually going on, and we've got to be clear about it.
So the Doge meltdown, I mean, it was kind of amazing to watch. So they say, we're saving all this money, and then they delete things from the website, the wall of receipts where they're saying all the money they're saving. I mean, there was some real backtracking this week, not to mention, I mean, the funds that have stopped, the court orders that are being ignored, and the real people, American and across the globe, who are being hurt by these decisions. What were some of the things that you saw that stood out?
Well, I think that this is a very important point because most people in the United States don't love the bureaucracy, don't love federal workers simply because they're federal workers. And for years, since Ronald Reagan said government is the problem, and then Bill Clinton went on to say the era of big government is over. And then Donald Trump started talking about the deep state. All of this cumulatively kind of emphasizes and underscores public distrust of these vague bureaucrats. So people are not going to get terribly upset about the fact that an agency is shrinking or Trump is firing people. But what they will get upset about is when very important public services that they count on are not available, are not there. When, for example, there is more concern about aviation safety, and we know that the FAA is cutting back dramatically. When there's more concern about getting your Social Security checks, and we learned this week that what is going on, and Musk and company have basically told the Social Security Administration that 50% of all of the Social Security Administration personnel are going to be fired. Well, what does that mean in terms of getting your Social Security checks or having somebody on the other end of the phone answering the phone when you need help if you are trying to get Social Security or Medicare, and they're very closely allied. And we learned this week that Congress, the Republicans in Congress, are going to be cutting $880 billion from Medicaid, a huge slice of Medicaid. And I think this is part of the discussion, too, because it's all, cut for the purpose of what? Generating a huge and creating the opportunity for Trump to generate a huge tax cut, mostly for very rich people in this country.
That's it. And this week, we've started to see the health implications of all of these cuts, right? We have an Ebola outbreak starting, right? And we've cut off all funding to support Ebola mitigation and Ebola treatment overseas and watching what's happening. We've seen measles A death from measles for the first time since 2015 happened here in Texas. We've seen the 9/11 survivals health program cut. So we're starting to see, people are going to start to feel this directly. And sadly, more stories are going to be breaking through, right?
Well, that's right. And the downside of waiting until the public actually sees the consequences of these cuts is that a lot of people are going to be harmed. A lot of people are going to be hurt. Some people are going to die as a result of the incompetence, malfeasance, nonfeasance, and treachery that we see in this administration.
And the wild part is you see all these USAID cuts, so people who are being treated and who are being hopefully prevented from getting malaria, tuberculosis, HIV, AIDS. But part of the problem is we're cutting the people that are tracking how the programs are doing, how the people are doing, whether it's deaths or morbidity and, different kinds of measurements. The measurement part of stuff has been cut, so we won't even know the impacts.
Well,
right
we
away.
will know when it starts to actually take a toll. This is actually a good note to stop on for a second, Heather, and that is that Donald Trump seems to think that the interests of the United States end at the official borders of the United States. What he doesn't understand is that some of the most important challenges we face as a nation, having to do with climate change, having to do with disease that moves around the globe, all of these things are not within the borders of the United States. You can't keep things from affecting what is going on in the United States if they are outside in the rest of the world. And the same thing goes for Putin's aggression. Donald Trump's view of America is a 19th or 18th century view of territory. But that's not what America is. And it certainly has nothing to do...
It's not what we need.
It has nothing to do with the ideals of this country.
I remember I worked in global health, and one time I was traveling. I was either in London Heathrow or maybe I was in Frankfurt in Germany, and at the airport, and an older gentleman next to me tossed his coffee all over himself. And so I handed him my napkins, and I said, if you watch my stuff, I'll run and get you some napkins. And I came back, and he said, you have to be American, because no one else helps someone so quickly with no questions asked. And he wasn't, he just kind of commented on it. It was a compliment of sorts, but it wasn't, but where is that? That feels like a time of the past, right? That this is our reputation as helpers globally.
Well, it was our reputation. Certainly, if you go back to the late 19th century, when we were the last refuge for the world's poor and suffering. Emma Lazarus's poem on the Statue of Liberty. Even in terms of immigration, what Trump is doing is so violative of the fundamental principles of the United States. And by the way, on that issue of immigration, it's not that he's just trying to eliminate or deport undocumented immigrants. He's stopping immigrants. He's stopping legal immigration into the United States. Unless you pay for a gold card, which costs something like, $500 million? This is so inconsistent with the ideals of this country.
I think it was 5 million. Yeah, the gold card. And he's like, we're going to get thousands of people to come in and I'm going to raise so much money in this way. Can we talk a little bit about the GOP budget? So this week, all Republican members, save one, I think, voted in favor of this continuing resolution. Tell us about the budget and what we should be worried about as it stands.
Well, there are actually two things. There is a March 14th deadline. After that point, the government runs out of funding. So it's another one of these, we get into these periodically more and more often. But we get out of them through continuing resolutions, basically continuing everything as it is right now. We haven't really had an effective government budget for years. Donald Trump and the Republicans want to use the budget process and actually have a budget as a pretext for pushing through what's called reconciliation in the Senate, with no filibuster, with no opportunity for a 60-vote requirement. And that reconciliation bill is primarily going to, at least in Donald Trump's mind and in the House's mind, going to be about a tax cut, a gigantic tax cut, $4.5 trillion going mainly to the wealthy and big corporations, a larger version of the tax cut that he did in the first Trump administration, which, again, mainly benefited the rich and big corporations. But in order to do that, and this is what's happening right now, the budget that Congress, the House, has just passed and will go to the Senate, cuts critical programs for children, for child nutrition, for food stamps, for Medicaid. The people who are being sacrificed for the sake of a big tax cut for the wealthy are some of the most vulnerable people in our country, including a lot of seniors. If it turns out that they're attacking Social Security, and it looks like they are beginning to do that, in terms of what Musk is up to, then it's reverse Robin Hood. I mean, it's the most flagrant example of reverse Robin Hood engineering that we've seen in this country.
I know it. And so here we have, let's talk a little bit about the conflicts of interest that are coming up, right? And who's actually benefiting. So we know that hundreds of millions are going to go to several Republicans who are voting in favor of this, of course. Let's look at where the money is going. Follow the money. You've taught me this for years and years and years. So who is benefiting from this budget as it's going to be, enacted? So it's going to be Musk himself. So let's talk about that. But then there are a number of Republicans who have voted in favor who are going to get money back into their pockets based on how they're structuring everything.
Because they are wealthy and because many of them are going to get huge tax benefits out of the tax cuts. Musk is also going to get an additional set of benefits because Musk is a major government contractor. In fact, what's come out is that Musk has got $38 billion of government contracts over the last few years that have come to him, subsidies, loans, contracts that have come to him, particularly at moments where his businesses have been most threatened. So when Musk says, as he did tweet on X, he said that people who are dependent on government are parasites. Use the word parasites to describe people who are dependent on government. He's the largest parasite of all in terms of this $38 billion going to one big parasite.
And this is current dollars and future potential contracts, right? There was a new one between the FAA and Verizon that it was announced that he would benefit from and reap billions
Well, he's
from.
fighting that. He doesn't want the FAA to contract with Verizon. Verizon is his competitor. He wants the FAA to contract with his Starlink division of SpaceX, and he's putting a lot of pressure on the FAA. And the FAA is trying to resist, but the FAA is not really, there's more and more pressure coming from the top. Heather, this is another example of conflicts of interest, that Musk is taking advantage of his closeness to Trump and his dominance over this, whatever this Doge is, to make sure that he comes out on top, that he gets more federal contracts, and the contracts are going to him and not to his competitors.
And that's exactly it. So he has, his hands in all of the pies. But think about, too, how much corporate welfare, how many handouts he's already benefited from over his lifetime. And now he's coming and trying to get more. I mean, it's wild. We should add up that number, past, present, and potential future.
And also consider the most obvious fact that this is the richest man in the world. And he's running, for all intents and purposes, the federal government of the richest society, the richest nation in the world. It boggles the mind that this one single individual has as much power as he does have.
But as you have been pointing out on your Substack and otherwise, his popularity is not through the roof, and it's declining, right? People are concerned about his personal economic interests in terms of what Doge is doing. They're not a fan of his on average, so that gives me a little hope. But don't get too excited. We're not at the hope portion yet. Right? I mean, I like seeing his popularity. I mean, it makes me feel a little saner and a little more secure to see people not happy with what he's doing.
Well, his popularity and also Trump's popularity are diving, and the economy, the United States economy is also showing signs of real strain. There's real worry about the number of people who are being cut off of the payrolls, worry about all of the contractors, much larger number, who are being canceled and who are losing jobs, and also Trump's talk of tariffs and his organizing the federal government for mass deportations. I mean, you put all of this together, the tariffs, the mass deportations, and DOGE, and you wonder how the economy can maintain what's called aggregate demand. I mean,
right.
You're going to have a major economic problem, and at the same time, you have potential inflation. And we see those signs all over the economy right now. Consumer confidence is down. People are worried about the future. And a lot of companies are holding back investments because they are worried. And the Federal Reserve Board is not reducing interest rates because it is worried about inflation.
So there's economic power. I mean, you've talked about power since you were 4 and on the lap of the vice president, right? I mean, there's the power there's physical power and there's hard power and there's force. So this week we've seen, and you had a great Substack on this, Trump is not only consolidating, so much economic power, and so is Musk, but also what has he been up to as it relates to the monopoly on force and actual physical power, and with the hirings and firings of the week.
It's important that we focus on this because as Trump tries to take more and more power, remember, he's already taken power away from Congress in terms of the Article 1 Constitution power of the purse. He's saying, no, Congress, I can decide what's being spent. No, you're not going to decide. That's illegal under the Constitution, but he's doing it anyway. He's also taken away Article 3 of the Constitution power from the judiciary, saying, no, I'm not going to follow. If the lower courts say something that I don't agree with, I'm simply not going to do what they say. But he's also at the same time staffing the parts of the government that really are and should be neutral with regard to acting in the in terms of shows of force, having the force of the nation, the military, the federal courts, the FBI, the Justice Department, places where people really and their lives are potentially at stake in terms of what the government does. What he's doing is putting people into those key positions who are not loyal to the United States, but who are loyal to Donald Trump. We've got to understand, Heather, that this is a very critical and disturbing technique of a dictator. This is what dictators do. This is what Putin did. This is what Hungary's Viktor Orban did. You take over the military and the investigative arms of your judiciary itself. You put your personal loyalists in those positions.
Right.
What he's done, for example, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Joint Chiefs of Staff is supposed to be there to not only provide a president with good, solid, neutral advice, but also guard the military from a president's personal desires or craziness or whatever the president wants to do.
Whims, right.
Yeah, whims. Whims is the right word. But the Joint Chiefs of Staff had been headed for the last several years by a fellow who was very respected by many people in the military. I think his name is C.Q. Brown. Trump, without any warning, without any reason, fired Brown and put into Brown's place a man who goes by the name of Kane. His nickname is Raisin Kane. Trump thought that this was very funny when he met this Air Force lieutenant years ago. But what Trump remembers most about this meeting and repeated to the Conservative Political Action Convention is that this man is totally loyal to Trump. Raisin Kane said to Trump, and Trump quoted this, he said, Raisin Kane told him, "Sir, I love you, I admire you, I will kill for you." This, to Trump, is the qualification to be the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And look at the FBI. The people that Trump is putting in the FBI, Kash Patel, as FBI director, knows nothing about the FBI, has been a conspiracy theorist who is totally loyal to Trump. The deputy that Trump just put into the FBI, Bongino, who is he?
Yeah.
Where does he come from? He's a commentator on Fox News. He's a conspiracy theorist. He has a popular podcast. And he's a total Trump loyalist. These people should not be where they are. Remember, they should be working for us.
Remember when President Biden pardoned his own son and everyone was so appalled? I hate to even bring it up, but I mean, it feels like he knew what was coming. I mean...
Yeah. I think Biden knew exactly what was coming because Kash Patel has maintained an enemies list for Trump of all of the people that the FBI ought to be investigating and the Justice Department ought to go against. So if we find ourselves in a short amount of time in the same position this country felt itself under Richard Nixon, who had his own enemies list, nobody should be surprised.
Right. So I'll repeat it again, but it does make me feel slightly better to be describing what's happening, even though it's miserable. This monopoly on force is part of the larger picture of tyranny and dictatorship. And so we have to be paying attention to it and calling it what it is, right?
Well,
and I'm so glad you continue to do that, Bob.
I think that this is important because if you just read the paper every day, listen to the news every day, there's so many bits and pieces. If you don't see the whole, if you don't see the large theme, if you don't see that we are drifting very rapidly toward dictatorship, then it's hard to summon the courage and the tenacity and the will to do something about it. I think the American public needs to see the whole picture if we are going to have any hope of stopping this.
And what do you think we can expect? So March 4th is a big date because, first of all, it's his Trump's non-State of the Union State of the Union, where he, holds a joint session and speaks to everyone. But then also tariffs kick in on March 4th, right? What's going to happen?
Well, he says tariffs are going to kick in March 4th, but remember, he has delayed tariffs every time he has talked about them. And part of the reason he's delayed them, I believe, is because every time he says the word tariff, the stock market reacts negatively. And the one metric that he pays a very, very close attention to is the stock market, and secondly, the bond market. And if stocks and bonds react negatively, he gets worried. A lot of his oligarchic friends start calling him and saying, "What's going on? Stop doing whatever you're doing." So we may see that those tariffs never come to be, that they are only a bargaining strategy.
Yeah, and that's part of he loves to do this, right? It's threat and to hold it over and then to push and then to delay. It feels like yet another power tactic, assuming it's that orchestrated. And then so the State of the Union, that's not the State of the Union. I mean, we shall see. Do you think the Washington Post will cover it? I mean, that happened this week, too. We didn't even talk about that. Jeff
Well, we
Bezos
should
has taken over
hope. Let's talk about that for a minute, Heather, because that's part of the large scheme here. What happened at the Washington Post was that Jeff Bezos the second richest person
I think
in the
he's
United
third.
States.
I think he's third, isn't he?
I think
in
he's-
the United States. Globally, I think he's third.
Yeah, he may be third. He's in the United States. He's second. Jeff Bezos, who purchased the Washington Post in 2013.
Was it that
Jeff
long ago? I forgot that.
Jeff Bezos said to the Washington Post and he admitted this publicly, no longer will there be any opinions expressed by the Post's opinion page that are not compatible with free markets as Bezos define free markets, and freedom as Bezos define freedom. Obviously, this is a sop to Trump. Because Bezos has a lot of other businesses that depend on the Trump administration's goodwill. He's got a rocket business. He's competing with the first and richest person in the world, Elon Musk. He's got, other businesses, Amazon, obviously. He's got to make sure that he is in the good graces of Trump. And so this is a pattern, and we've seen this pattern. Bezos basically defangs the Washington Post. He didn't allow the Washington Post even to put up a wraparound advertisement that was critical of Trump. He did not allow the Washington Post just before the election to have endorse Kamala Harris as the editorial board wanted to do in the Washington Post. He is basically doing what Elon Musk did to Twitter. That is turning it into a mouthpiece, another propaganda vehicle for Trump. This is another thing that dictators do. They intimidate the press. They intimidate the oligarchs. They make sure that the oligarchs are working for them rather than for the people in general.
Yes. Okay, I think we've got to transition to what you would call reasons for moderate optimism. Is that what you're calling it? Modest optimism? I mean,
modest optimism.
Modest.
Well, again, there are not too many green shoots of positive
but the
positivity
economic boycott yesterday, you announced that you would be boycotting things. Other people chimed in. There was a lot of engagement around this online. It was pretty impressive to see it all happen. So that is an example of the power of people coming together and deciding to do something and withholding their power to show they have power, right?
That's exactly right. And I think one of the biggest dangers to our democracy now is not just Trump's galloping toward dictatorship, but Americans feeling that we are powerless to do anything about it. The kind of sense of despair and cynicism that a lot of people feel. So when there is a kind of economic mobilization, even for a day, where people don't buy from big companies, particularly companies that have collaborated with Trump on ending DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, well, people feel a little bit more emboldened, a little bit more empowered. And this is all important. This is all, there's been a big kind of boycott of Tesla. And I think for the same reason, because people just feel like they don't want to be associated with a product that is part of the Trump-Musk regime. It's not even an administration,
right. And
regime.
The stock is down, right? Tesla stock is way down.
The stock is way down. Even we have labor unions who are asking big asset managers, what are you doing about the Tesla stock you have? I mean, because it's way down, and why should labor union people be investing in Tesla?
I was just going to say we've seen what we mentioned a little bit earlier, which is the opinion polls, right? So Musk not doing well, but neither is Trump. So that's a reason for some modest optimism.
Yes, in fact, more people now disapprove of Trump than approve of Trump. And that is a turnaround, because when he came in, we're still in what is called typically the honeymoon period, the first 100 days. But Trump has managed to alienate so many people, cause so many people to be fearful of what he is doing with good reason, that his negatives are now exceeding his positives. The trends for Trump are all in the wrong direction. For the rest of us, they're in the right direction.
And you saw that Bernie, God love him, Bernie Sanders at 83 is going on a national tour to fight oligarchy.
And he went to red states, Heather. And this is really, God love him. I mean, Bernie is out there fighting, and he wanted to show, and he did show, and he's going to continue to show, that even in bright red America, people are fed up with oligarchy. They're fed up with big corporations that are ripping them off. They're fed up with a government that collaborates with the oligarchs, that's run by the billionaire oligarchs. And Bernie continues. He's not going to run for president again, but he's out there making the case.
Right. And being left behind is one thing, but watching the cycle go in this reverse Robin Hood, as you said earlier, he's so good at pointing it out and getting people to listen. So good that he's doing that. Any other seeds of hope?
Well, that's also the case with, Elizabeth Warren has been attracting huge crowds, and other people in Congress who are more progressive. The progressives, started out really to be very popular under the beginning of the Biden administration. Then we didn't hear all that much from them, but progressive voices are now on the rise again. And I think it's because many Americans have come to realize that the fight is not between the left and the right. It's not Republican versus Democrat. It's not conservative versus progressive or liberal. The fight is between democracy and fascism. And Trump is taking us as fast as he can toward fascism.
But people are showing up at town halls. We've got groups like Indivisible and other ones where people are getting organized and getting coordinated, and their voices are being heard, and they are speaking up. And that is encouraging, and I think is happening more and more and more. And we have, because I love to do this to you, an archival clip. Here we go.
Oh
yeah,
no!
Bob.
Wait a minute!
Yeah.
What is this? What is this about?
So this is you talking about the importance of staying engaged when you did a town hall when you were running for governor in 2002 of Massachusetts.
Politics is the applied form of democracy. And if we are engaged in politics, if we are engaged in democracy, then we are taking back something that is rightfully ours. If we simply turn our back on it, if we engage in kind of resignation, if we kind of throw up our hands and say, well, nothing will ever change, we can't do anything about it, it's an insider's game, then we are in deep trouble. We are in deep trouble. Resignation, cynicism, that means the end. And right now we are living through a time in America where there's a sense that the insiders are in control, whether it's the public sector or the private sector, or it's corporations. The insiders, the people who are self-dealing, who are dealing with their friends and cronies, the cronies are in control. You look at Enron and Global Crossing and WorldCom, and the cronies, the people who are the best friends, I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back. I'll give you a break, you give me a break. Well, let's all make each other rich, and the hell with everybody else. That attitude, whether it's in companies or in government, is dangerous unless people rise up and let themselves be heard and stop it. Because otherwise we are all going to live a much more precarious existence. And our livelihoods and our commonwealth will be in jeopardy.
So good.
Oh, well, that was 2002, Heather.
23 years ago.
But I sound like a broken record.
No,
but
you are the best broken record. I will listen to you every day, all day, because democracy is not a spectator sport. It's active. You say that.
And the other thing that I often say is that we are the leaders that we have been waiting for. In other words, don't wait for leaders. If this is a democracy, if this is an experiment started almost 250 years ago in self-government, that experiment lives on. Self-government requires people to take responsibility and to be the leaders. A lot of people say 2025 is not really all that important. The big election year is 2026. Well, obviously that's important in terms of the midterms. But this year alone, in 2025, there are over 100,000 elections if you're looking at every level of government. There are going to be, and there already have been, special elections for Congress, but there are also many gubernatorial elections. There are elections all the way down to your city council. There are opportunities for everybody to get involved. So I hope everybody does. And
Hear,
on that,
hear.
On that
And
note,
also state Supreme Courts. I mean, there are very important ones happening.
oh yes, Wisconsin. Everybody out there from Wisconsin, pay a lot of attention. Elon Musk is trying to buy that Supreme Court position. And don't let him. Don't let the Wisconsin Supreme Court succumb to Elon Musk and Donald Trump. This is too important for that to happen. Listen, Heather, thank you. I know you've been working very hard. You've been traveling. I really, really appreciate you joining me and joining all of us. Everybody out there, keep the faith. We are going to prevail.